He texted me from Las Vegas. I've taken the money, the car, and the girl. Good luck starting over. What he didn't know. By the time he hit send, there was nothing left for him to take. If you've ever dreamed of taking back control after betrayal, hit that subscribe button right now. Like this video if you believe karma doesn't always wait, sometimes, it's delivered with style. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's justice. Let's dive in. The text came in at 11:17 p.m. I'm leaving you. I'm in Vegas now with someone new. She's 22 and actually makes me feel alive. I sold your car, drained the account, and canceled your cards. Try to keep up. I read it once. Then twice. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't even feel surprised. Because by the time Ethan sent that message, the version of me he thought he was destroying, she didn't exist anymore. He just didn't know it yet. He imagined me crumbling. Alone in some dim apartment, crying over the ruins of my life while he toasted champagne with a girl half my age. But Ethan was 2 steps behind, as usual. Because while he was rehearsing his grand exit, I had been preparing for war. It started 6 months before that text. The shift was small. A change in tone when he got home. Locked phones. Sudden business trips with no paper trail. The charm faded into contempt, but he was sloppy. He thought I wasn't paying attention. That I was too soft. Too trusting. Too in love. But what he didn't know was that I'd stopped loving him the moment he made me feel invisible. The betrayal didn't break me. It woke me up. While he was playing poker with our marriage, I started gathering chips of my own, quiet, methodical, surgical. The first was the bank. I didn't empty our joint account in a rush. That would have triggered alarms. I moved small amounts into a private account in my name, slow enough to slip under his radar, fast enough to matter. By the time he reached for the treasure chest, all he found was sawdust. Then came the car. He thought he sold it. Sure. Except I had already transferred the title to my cousin Shelby weeks ago. Ethan sold a vehicle he didn't legally own. Good luck explaining that to the new buyer once the fraud report hits their inbox. And the credit cards. He proudly canceled mine. But he didn't realize I had already opened lines under my name. Clean. Separate. Untouchable. His sense of control was an illusion, just like his loyalty. So when that arrogant text came through, I didn't flinch. I sat at my desk, fingers tracing the rim of my wine glass, letting the silence answer for me. He thought he had won. That he had shattered me. But I had already left the battlefield. He was swinging at smoke. The folder in front of me was labeled, Final Move. Inside were months of receipts, passwords, contracts, a map of every move he never saw coming. My strategy wasn't built on rage. It was built on patience. People like Ethan never see women like me coming. Because we don't shout. We plan. A few hours later, the second message came in, where the hell is the money? No greeting. No shame. Just confusion. I could picture him at the bank, expecting 6 figures and getting crumbs. The way his voice would rise. The manager's calm apology. The realization spreading like cold ink through his chest. I didn't answer. Let him stew. Instead, I poured another drink, walked to the window of my new apartment, the one I had leased months ago under a new LLC he'd never heard of, and watched the city lights dance across the skyline. My skyline. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was me reclaiming the narrative. Because he wanted me to feel small. He wanted me to beg. He wanted to be the one who walked away. But what Ethan didn't understand what narcissists never understand, is that the quiet ones always hit hardest. We don't just leave. We make sure there's nothing left to come back to. The third message was a voicemail. The panic had set in. Claire, this isn't funny. Where's the money? Call me back. We need to talk. We. The same we he walked away from with a smirk and a showgirl. The same we he gutted with a text message like a knife in the dark. I laughed. Not bitterly. Just a soft exhale of amusement at how little he understood the game he tried to play. He thought betrayal made him powerful. I knew it just made me free. He had no idea that the moment he chose her, I chose myself. And I was only getting started. I remember the exact moment I stopped loving Ethan Bishop. It wasn't when I found the lipstick on his shirt or overheard the flirtatious call he denied. It wasn't even when I smelled perfume that didn't belong to me on the passenger seat of our car. It was on a quiet Tuesday night, pasta on the stove, wine glasses half full, when I asked how his meeting went, and he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Can we not do this right now?" Not angry. Not even annoyed. Just, nothing. I didn't matter. That was the moment something cracked, not with a bang, but a click. Like the final puzzle piece of a picture I never wanted to see. I didn't cry. I nodded. Stirred the sauce. And I started building my exit, silently. You don't live a decade with someone without knowing how they think. Ethan was impulsive. Addicted to the thrill of getting away with things. He didn't just cheat with his body, he cheated with his ego. Every lie was a performance. Every smirk, a dare. And I had front row seats to the whole show. So I studied the script. Step 1, build a financial firewall. While Ethan played golf with clients and flirted with women named Tiffany or Lexi or whatever fantasy he was chasing, I was on the phone with a financial advisor who owed me a favor. We created a separate entity. Quiet. Legal. Mine. I moved our biggest investments into that account under the guise of estate restructuring. He never asked, Ethan didn't do paperwork. He just signed where I pointed. Step 2, evidence. I knew the woman's name. Kelsey. With an I-E, of course. She was a cocktail waitress turned personal trainer, all abs and eyelashes. I didn't confront him. Why would I? I followed her social media instead. I screen captured every photo of her in clothes I didn't recognize but paid for. I saved the receipts. I logged the locations. Every fake business trip he took that matched her check-ins. Documented. I had a file titled Kelsey Karma. Step 3, legal insulation. I had always deferred to him in public. The cool wife. Supportive. Smiling. But behind the scenes, I started rewriting the story. I reviewed every document with my name on it, leases, insurance, titles. Anything he thought we shared, I restructured. The condo in Lakeview he planned to use as his Vegas escape pad. Transferred to a holding company with only my name. Our joint trust. Dissolved. Refiled. Legally separated. He never noticed. He was too busy trying to hide his lies to see mine. It wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about erasing every string he could pull. He thought he was orchestrating the perfect betrayal. I was orchestrating the perfect vanishing act. There was something quietly exhilarating about it, sipping coffee while emailing attorneys, walking through banks with documents hidden behind a smile, hearing him complain about how good I have it while I was the one building our new world, without him in it. He used to joke that I was the quiet type. He was right. Quiet like a bomb. By the time his betrayal turned into abandonment, I was already gone, emotionally, mentally, financially. All he had was the illusion of control. And illusions break. When he finally packed his bags, the same navy duffel I bought him for our anniversary, he didn't say goodbye. He left his ring on the counter, like he was dropping off trash. What he didn't realize was that the moment that ring hit granite, the timer started ticking. Every passive-aggressive comment, every gaslight, every little humiliation I had buried in my chest for years, was now part of the fuel. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to win. The day after he left, I bought myself flowers. White peonies. The kind he never remembered I liked. I lit a candle and sat at my desk, opening the folder I had labeled just in case. It was time to make it, now. From across the country, Ethan was toasting to his new life, smug, certain he'd walked away victorious. What he didn't know was that I had already made the first call. To the banker. To the lawyer. To the real estate agent handling the listing he thought I'd forget to cancel. I wasn't burning his empire. I was removing his name from it, one signature at a time. And he was too busy celebrating to notice the ground disappearing beneath his feet. Ethan always had a thing for dramatic exits. Flashy, loud, public. The kind that left people whispering in his wake. He once stormed out of a charity gala because they ran out of his preferred scotch. Another time, he resigned from a job he was about to be fired from, just so he could say it was on his terms. That was Ethan in a nutshell, a man so obsessed with control, he didn't realize how much he was being watched. So when I found out he sold my car, our car, according to him, I wasn't even surprised. In his mind, it was his parting shot. The final nail in my financial coffin. But what he didn't know was that I had already unscrewed the entire frame. Weeks before he left, I had quietly gone to the DMV. Transferred the title of the black Audi SUV to my cousin Riley. She was listed as the sole legal owner. I kept that piece of information tucked away, waiting. Because I knew Ethan would try something big. Something petty. Something illegal. And he did. A few days after his glorious "I'm in Vegas with my 22-year-old soulmate" message, I received an alert from an old mutual friend, Danielle. She worked in a dealership and had spotted my Audi being traded in. Ethan was all smiles, arms around Kelsey, bragging about his new chapter. He handed over the keys. The paperwork. The performance. He even lowballed the car's value just to get quick cash. And the dealership, unaware, processed the sale. Until 2 days later. That's when Riley, with a smirk on her face and a folder of proof in hand, paid them a visit. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She simply handed over the title and said, "He didn't own this. You've been scammed." I didn't even have to lift a finger. The dealership froze the transaction and filed a formal complaint. Ethan was contacted. Denied everything. Then pleaded ignorance. Then blamed Riley. Then threatened legal action. But there was nothing he could do. Legally, he had sold stolen property. And the worst part for him. He didn't get to keep a dime. The sale was void. The cash confiscated. And the Audi. Safely parked back in my cousin's garage, clean, untouched, and legally untouchable. That was the beauty of it. Ethan had planned a grand gesture. A punishment. A message. But in reality, he had set himself up for public embarrassment. The man who prided himself on winning deals had just scammed a dealership and was now being investigated for fraud. He called. Of course, he did. "Claire, what the hell is going on? They're saying I never owned the car." I let the voicemail play out while I folded laundry. "You're ruining my name. My reputation. This is your fault. Your fault." It was always someone else's, wasn't it? I sent the voicemail to my lawyer and added the transcript to my growing collection of Ethan's downfall evidence. This wasn't petty. This was proof. Proof that every time he tried to take something from me, he'd lose something of his own. He thought revenge was loud, explosive, violent. But real revenge is paperwork, signatures, silence. It's letting the hammer fall without ever lifting it yourself. And the hammer wasn't done. Because the car was just one move. And Ethan had no idea the board was still full of pieces. While he was busy unraveling the dealership disaster, I was handling the next one, the condo he thought he could crash in when the Vegas fantasy ran dry. The lease. It had never been his. Just like the life he thought he owned. That's what people like Ethan never understand. They think betrayal makes them bold. That cheating gives them power. But it's not power if someone else is pulling the strings. And I was holding everyone. Every move he made was exactly what I wanted. And he was about to walk into the next trap, barefoot. Ethan always assumed I needed him for stability. He believed that if he ever walked away, I'd crumble beneath the weight of my own helplessness. He made passive comments for years, about how lucky I was that he handled the hard stuff, how he kept us afloat, how I wouldn't last a week without him. Every condescending jab was a thread in the web he thought held me captive. What he didn't know was that I had been cutting myself loose for months. Take the condo, for example. The one in Eastwood Heights with the sleek balcony and floor-to-ceiling windows. The one we furnished together but he claimed as his bachelor escape. He always called it my place, even though the lease was in both our names. At least, it used to be. 2 months before Ethan sent his dramatic Vegas breakup text, I made a visit to the property management office. I brought pastries. Smiled. Said Ethan was traveling a lot and we were restructuring finances. The manager, a sweet woman named Kendra, nodded sympathetically as I slid new paperwork across her desk, removing Ethan from the lease entirely. Legally. Quietly. When he left for Vegas, he thought he still had a crash pad back home. A place to land when the novelty wore off. I waited until I saw his return flight confirmation. Yes, I had access to his travel email, and I made the call. I'm sorry, Kendra would tell him over the intercom. Access denied. You're not listed as a resident anymore. I imagined him jabbing the buzzer, jaw tightening, fingers curling around his duffel bag. The doorman looking on, confused. His belongings. Already removed. Placed into storage. And not the kind he could access. That was the condo. But it didn't stop there. While Ethan was sipping overpriced cocktails on the strip, flashing his ego around like a black card, he had no idea what was happening to his actual credit. You see, he was so proud of cutting me off. Like canceling the shared credit cards was some final power move. What he didn't know was that I'd opened new lines under my maiden name months ago. Quiet, clean, and far beyond his reach. He had no access to my financial life anymore. But I still had access to his. I watched as he booked lavish dinners, luxury suites, spa packages. I watched as the charges stacked up, thinking he'd be footing the bill with the joint savings he thought he stole. He didn't realize until it was too late that those cards were still in my name. One quick call. Fraudulent use. Closed. Frozen. He was stranded. Mid-trip. In a 5-star hotel. With a 22-year-old clinging to her own fantasy of wealth and protection. The moment the card declined, I imagined the exact expression on his face, the confusion curdling into panic. And Kelsey. She wasn't there for hardship. She was there for bottle service and Instagrammable brunches. When those disappeared, so did she. He sent another voicemail. His voice was raw now. No more cocky undertones. Just panic. Claire, this is serious. They're threatening to call security. I need access to my account. This isn't a joke. Please. Call me back. Please. That was new. But I didn't call back. Instead, I pulled up the spreadsheet I'd created, each column color-coded, accounts closed, assets moved, properties reclaimed. I reviewed it like a conductor preparing for the final crescendo. He had taken everything he thought he could. But he was just taking what I had left behind. The truth is, I didn't need him to suffer the way I did. I didn't want revenge that looked like screaming or slashing tires. I wanted him to sit in silence. To feel the emptiness. To realize that for the first time in his life, he couldn't charm, lie, or bluff his way out. This wasn't just a financial dismantling. This was psychological. He was a man who defined himself by control. And now, control was the one thing he couldn't buy back. I watched the city skyline from my new apartment, the one he didn't know existed. A space I decorated by choice, not compromise. No traces of his taste. No reminders of his ghost. And as the city pulsed beneath me, I took a long sip of wine and opened a new tab on my laptop. Because I wasn't done. There was still one move left. The one that would shatter the image he tried so hard to protect. And all I had to do was click send. Ethan didn't just crave control, he craved admiration. He built his entire identity around being the successful guy. The man people envied at dinner parties. The one who always picked up the check, gave unsolicited advice, and smirked when people called him a genius with numbers. It wasn't enough for him to be rich, he needed to be praised. But what he didn't know was that the empire he flaunted wasn't as airtight as he thought. I knew every weak point. Every shady client. Every time he forgot to report income or used our joint assets as collateral without telling me. Ethan had this dangerous blend of arrogance and carelessness, like the rules never applied to him. And I had kept receipts. The folder on my desktop was labeled integrity. Not because he had any, but because that's what he'd lose. I started with a man named Richard Klein. Ethan's former partner. They'd co-launched a startup 3 years ago, some boutique investing firm for high-net-worth clients. Ethan always bragged about how he pushed Richard out, clean and legal, he claimed. But he didn't know I'd seen the ledger. The manipulated statements. The hidden accounts. I composed the email carefully, professional tone, attachments embedded, subject line simple, a few things you should know. No threats. No drama. Just evidence. Bullet pointed. Time-stamped. Neatly organized. Then I sent it. One email. One match. And then I sent another, this time to the state regulatory board. And another, to a local financial news blogger who once tried to interview Ethan but got brushed off. I gave her the exclusive she always wanted. Complete with screenshots, bank statements, and a tip, he's about to go under. You'll want to watch closely. Every truth I released was something Ethan had buried. Thought forgotten. Dismissed as irrelevant. But now, they weren't irrelevant. They were radioactive. I didn't even need to wait long. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was Richard Klein. His voice was cold, almost surgical. Claire. I got your message. Thank you. You're right. He's been cooking books. And now, it's time he answers for it. A small smile tugged at my lips. Ethan had always told me I was too emotional to be taken seriously. That I wouldn't last a day in his world of contracts and numbers. That I didn't understand how the game works. Oh, I understood. I just played it differently. And I was winning. The next day, Ethan tried calling me 3 times. Left one message, clipped, angry. You're out of your mind. These people are asking questions. I'm getting emails. What the hell did you do? This could ruin me. There it was. The crack. The fear. He still thought he could scare me. Control the narrative. Fix it with a phone call and a half apology. But I had moved past apologies. He wanted to play with my life like it was disposable. I just showed him what disposable really looked like. The best part. I never lied. I didn't fabricate anything. I simply took his own actions, his own words, his own signatures, and exposed them to the light. And when the light hits a man like Ethan, all that charm turns to ash. Later that week, I heard from a mutual friend, someone still in his orbit. Claire, she whispered over the phone, he's unraveling. His name is being flagged on business forums. Clients are pulling out. Even Kelsey, she left. Packed up in the middle of the night. I stayed quiet. Not because I didn't care, but because I was enjoying the silence of not having to explain myself anymore. Let them watch. Let them guess how it all fell apart. I wasn't the woman scorned. I was the woman underestimated. And now, every move I made echoed louder than his lies ever did. I closed my laptop and leaned back on the couch. The sunset outside bled orange into the skyline, casting warm light across the new life I'd built, piece by piece, while he was too busy building fantasies on sand. His empire was falling. And I hadn't even touched it. I just let gravity do its job. It started with a single ring. Then 2. Then 4 voicemails in one afternoon. By the end of the week, Ethan had left 13. I didn't answer a single one. Each message revealed a new stage of his unraveling. The first were clipped. Cold. Demanding. Call me back. We need to talk. You don't understand what you're doing. He still thought he had leverage, still believed I was the Claire he used to manipulate with a sigh and a half lie. But Claire was gone. And with every unanswered ring, he began to realize it. By voicemail 5, his voice cracked. That smug confidence had started to rot around the edges. Claire, this is serious. You're going too far. There are people asking questions. I need to get ahead of this. He still thought this was damage control. That he could smooth talk his way out like he always did. But the damage was already done. Not by me. By him. All I had done was illuminate it. Voicemail 6 was the first time he said, please. Claire, please. You don't understand what's happening. I'm losing everything. I just need to talk. Just one call. And that's when I knew I'd won. Because Ethan Bishop never begged. Not when he was caught lying. Not when he spent our savings on business class tickets for his intern. Not when he came home at 3 a.m. with excuses that didn't even try to make sense. But now. Now he was on his knees. And I wasn't even in the room. Voicemail 7 was a mistake. He'd had too much to drink, I could hear it in his slurred edge, the way he stumbled over his words. You always thought you were smarter than me. But you're not. You were nothing without me. He laughed bitterly. Nobody cared who you were. You were just my wife. Just. That word. It used to flatten me. Back then. When I didn't know how to fight back. When I thought love meant shrinking so the other person could shine. But not anymore. That voicemail was saved, clipped, time-stamped, labeled in a folder titled, For Court. If needed. I didn't need it yet. But I knew him. So I prepared. Voicemails 8 through 11. All variations of the same unraveling. Claire, please. Let's talk. You're destroying me. Why are you doing this? Why? Because he made me feel invisible. Because he thought I was disposable. Because he laughed when I cried and rolled his eyes when I spoke. Because after a decade of silencing me, he expected me to whisper. Instead, I vanished, and left him screaming into empty space. Voicemail 12 was quieter. Almost hollow. I don't know where to go. Long pause. A ragged breath. I don't have anyone left. That's what he never understood. He spent so long building a world based on power, money, control. He thought if he kept everyone dependent on him, they'd never leave. But the truth was, no one was ever with him. They were with the illusion he sold. And now that illusion had expired. By voicemail 13, his voice was barely audible. Claire. I'm sorry. The pause stretched for nearly 30 seconds. I thought he might have hung up, but then, barely a whisper, I made a mistake. I believed him. Not because he meant it. But because for the first time in his life, he realized the consequences of being Ethan Bishop had finally caught up to him. I played that last voicemail once more, not for satisfaction, but for clarity. Not to gloat, but to remember how far I'd come. He had left me in silence. Discarded me like a chapter he'd outgrown. But now, the silence belonged to him. I poured myself tea. Lit a candle. Opened a book I hadn't touched in months. My phone buzzed again. I didn't look. Because the woman he left behind. She was no longer waiting to be heard. She was done listening. For a man like Ethan, losing control wasn't the worst thing. Losing his audience was. He had built his life like a stage, every dinner party, every networking event, every casual brunch carefully curated to make him look successful, important, invincible. He didn't want friends. He wanted fans. People who laughed at his stories, nodded at his advice, envied his lifestyle. So when it all started slipping, he didn't panic because he was falling, he panicked because people were watching him fall. And no one was reaching out a hand. It began with his so-called best friend, Tyler, the one who had cheered him on when he finally cut Claire loose. The same man who called me high maintenance behind my back and toasted Ethan's freedom with a whiskey glass raised high. Tyler was the first to go quiet. Not out of loyalty to me, but because I sent one email to Tyler's wife. With attachments. Financial reports. Screenshots. Names. I didn't have to explain anything. I just let the truth sit there. Let it do what truth always does when people finally stop ignoring it. Within 48 hours, Tyler blocked Ethan on every platform. Deleted their photos. Stopped returning calls. Their decades-long friendship ended not with a fight, but with silence. Next came the others, the poker crew, the golf buddies, the weekend warriors who had followed Ethan for the access, not the man. They started pulling back. Subtly at first, missed calls, delayed replies, polite distancing. But once the financial fallout hit public forums and whispers turned into headlines, they disappeared entirely. Men like Ethan don't have real friends. They have mirrors. And when the reflection cracks, the crowd moves on. But the one person Ethan never imagined would leave was Kelsey. She had been his trophy, his rebirth, his reckless proof that he still had it. She was 22, beautiful, and painfully naive. The type to confuse confidence with character. Until the moment the hotel locked their suite door after a declined card. I heard about it from a concierge friend I used to know back in Chicago, the kind of woman who never forgot a tip or a name. He yelled at her in the lobby, she told me. Said it was her fault for distracting him while he was handling business. She just stood there, mortified. 2 hours later, Kelsey was gone. No bags. No notes. Just vanished. A week later, she posted an Instagram story, sipping wine in a rooftop bar with a new guy. Caption, lesson learned. Don't mistake money for maturity. I smiled. Not because I wanted her to suffer, she had been a pawn. A foolish one, yes, but not the villain. The villain was alone now. Not metaphorically. Literally. No condo. No car. No access to the accounts he thought were his safety net. No loyal friends left to back his stories. No mistress to stroke his ego. No wife to clean up the mess. Just Ethan. The man behind the mask. Sitting in a cheap rental room. Refreshing a bank balance that wouldn't change. He tried reaching out again, of course. This time, through mutual acquaintances, people he thought I still trusted. Can you talk to her for me? Tell her I'm sorry. Ask her what she wants. What I wanted. I wanted exactly what I already had. Peace. I didn't want to punish him anymore. I just wanted him to live in the wreckage of his own making. That's what men like Ethan never understand. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about reflection. Letting them sit in the silence they created. Letting them finally see who they really are without the applause. And for the first time in Ethan's life, no one was clapping. Not even him. The call came at 2:03 a.m. I was already awake. Not because I was waiting, but because I no longer slept with the weight of his presence in my life. The air felt lighter. The silence wasn't heavy, it was peaceful. I sipped tea by the window, watching the city in the distance blink itself to sleep. Then the phone rang. His name flashed on the screen one last time. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then I answered. Not because I needed to hear him. But because I wanted him to hear me. He didn't say hello. He didn't even breathe at first. Just silence, fragile, heavy, unfamiliar. Then finally, a low whisper. Claire. I said nothing. Let him sit in the discomfort. Let him feel what I felt for years every time I asked a question and was met with cold indifference. I don't know where else to go. I didn't respond. I watched a taxi crawl through the streetlights below. I'm sorry, he added. Not the arrogant kind of sorry. Not the manipulative, guilt-laced version he used to toss around when caught. This one was different. Bare. Broken. And yet, it did nothing for me. Because apologies after destruction aren't redemption, they're confessions from the rubble. I thought I was making the right choice, he continued. I thought I wanted more. But it was never about her. It was about feeling powerful again. I finally spoke. And how does it feel now? To have all that power, gone. He exhaled sharply. Like drowning in air. For a brief moment, he was human again. Not the showman. Not the liar. Just a man gasping in the emptiness of his own design. I don't expect forgiveness, he said, voice trembling. I just need you to know. I see it now. Everything I did. I see you now. That line. That broke something in me, not because it redeemed him, but because it was the first time in our entire marriage he ever looked at me and actually saw a person. But it was too late. You don't get to see me now, I said softly. You had years to choose that. You didn't. He swallowed hard. I lost everything. No, I corrected, you gave everything away. You just never thought I'd be the one who wouldn't wait around to pick it all up. He didn't argue. Because there was nothing left to say. I'm sorry, he repeated. And this time, I believed him. But I didn't forgive him. Because forgiveness isn't owed, it's earned. And he had spent every moment of our marriage spending what he never intended to pay back. I hope you find peace, Ethan, I said gently. Not out of kindness. But because I already had mine. Then I hung up. No dramatics. No final insult. No sobbing. Just one click, and that chapter closed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything he had tried to erase in me: dignity, self-respect, clarity. And for the first time, I felt entirely weightless. Because revenge wasn't the goal. Freedom was. And I had never felt more free. I stood from the window, my reflection faint against the glass. The woman looking back at me wasn't bitter or hardened. She was simply done. And Ethan? He was finally alone with the only person responsible for his downfall. Himself. There wasn't a grand awakening. No triumphant montage. No viral quote splashed across my mirror. It happened on a Tuesday. I was brushing my hair in front of the bathroom mirror when I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. Not waiting for an apology. Not waiting for closure. Not waiting to be seen, chosen, or heard. The ache had evaporated. The grip around my heart was gone. And in its place was space. That morning, I made coffee without checking my phone. I played music while I cleaned, barefoot, windows open. And when the sunlight hit the couch just right, I sat down and let it warm my face without guilt. This wasn't healing. This was reclaiming. Piece by piece, I took my life back from the man who tried to bury it beneath his ego. And not in some dramatic flourish, but in the smallest, quietest ways. I started wearing the clothes he used to call too loud. I laughed loudly with friends he never approved of. I danced in my living room with a glass of wine and no makeup on. And I didn't think of him. Not in resentment. Not in sadness. I simply didn't. That was the real win. Because surviving Ethan wasn't the end goal. Living without him as a shadow over every thought, that was. I looked around my apartment, my art on the walls, my books stacked imperfectly, my dog curled up on a rug that didn't match anything. Everything was mine. Not expensive. Not curated. Just chosen. Freely. There was a time I would have apologized for this chaos. Now, I adored it. One afternoon, I walked into the boutique where I used to work part-time, the same one Ethan said was a hobby, not a job. The manager, Natalie, greeted me with a grin. Claire. You look like someone who finally exhaled. I think I did, I replied, and meant it. I asked if she still needed help. She didn't hesitate. Within a week, I was back behind the counter, arranging displays and styling customers. It was simple, but real. And no one could take it from me. One evening, a customer said, "You have such a calm energy." I nearly cried. Because I had never been described that way before. Not when I was in Ethan's world. Back then, I was difficult. Sensitive. Too much. But now I was calm. Present. Whole. Ethan had texted once more since our last call. Just one sentence. I missed the life we had. I read it. Then deleted it. Because what he missed wasn't a life, it was control. And control was no longer on the menu. Instead, I took a walk that evening, passing couples, joggers, a man playing guitar by the fountain. I smiled at the breeze, the streetlights, the way the world moved forward without him in it. Because that's what I had done. I had moved forward. Not with bitterness. With breath. And for the first time, my story didn't revolve around what he did. It revolved around what I chose. I chose me. And I'd never felt more alive. People ask me now if I ever regret it. Not the marriage. Not the divorce. But the way I handled the ending, the silence, the strategy, the total collapse of a man who thought I'd never stand on my own. They ask if it was cruel. If I ever feel guilty. If revenge made me feel better. And the truth is, no. Because it wasn't revenge. It was release. It was freedom dressed in precision. It was the sound of a door closing and finally realizing the lock had always been in my hands. For so long, I thought peace would come from answers. From apologies. From justice. But peace didn't arrive with a bang. It tiptoed in one morning while I was watering my plants, humming to myself. And that's when I understood, peace was the revenge. Not the fall of Ethan Bishop. But the rise of Claire. I didn't need to see him lose everything. I just needed to see that I could build something of my own, from scratch, with scars, without permission. Because real power isn't about control. It's about choice. And I had chosen to be free. The last time I heard anything about Ethan, it was from a mutual friend. He was living in a small one-bedroom outside the city. No car. No business. No social circle left. Trying to rebuild his image in a new town under an old story. I didn't feel sorry for him. Not because he hurt me. But because he still didn't understand that it wasn't me who destroyed him. He had done that all by himself. I just got out of the way. Now, my days are simple. Honest. I work. I cook. I laugh. I see people who see me back. I make plans without explaining. I spend money without guilt. I sleep without nightmares. There's no background noise of doubt anymore. No walking on eggshells. No internal list of things I'm allowed to say. I speak. I take up space. I live. And maybe one day, Ethan will finally understand what he really lost. Not the car. Not the account. But a woman who was loyal, intuitive, patient, and smart enough to play the long game. I never screamed. Never begged. Never chased. I just moved forward so far and so fast, he couldn't even see me anymore. He tried to make me feel small. And now, I'm untouchable. So if you ask me whether revenge made it all better, I'll tell you this. My revenge was waking up every day. Calm, clear, and completely free. While he wakes up to silence and the echo of the life he burned down, with his own hands.